Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Get Jashed. Today, I'm so happy to have with me Heather Hartman. Heather is a feminine biz coach with a focus on self-care, visibility, action, and sacred sales and magnetic marketing. So I'm really excited to have Heather here because she has such an interesting background that has led her to the work that she does now. And she's just one of my favorite people in this online world that we exist in right now as well. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jazzy. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's so interesting because you come from a male dominated corporate environment. And you've had a little bit of a journey from there. So I guess starting from there, just so people kind of understand what has led you from that paradigm to the one that you operate in now.
Yeah, so I started in corporate basically when I was like 16, and I worked in a lot of accounting departments, primarily for construction companies and steel suppliers and pipe, valve, and fitting distributors. So it was always extremely male dominated and very competition driven. And it was, I just remember feeling that I wasn't meant to really spend my lifetime doing that kind of work in that kind of environment, because I never really felt like I could be myself, and I just never felt like I really fit in. And so I essentially went from working in corporate to, I basically jumped right into entrepreneurship. And this was at the end of 2016, right after I got married. So, and the journey from working in corporate at the age of 16 to at the end of 2016, I was 35. So that's almost 20 years I worked in the corporate environment. And so basically, the funny part for me is that I went from this sort of toxic male dominated industry in like construction and, pipe, valves, and fittings and steel and stuff like that to what I was attracted to when I was in that place was toxic male mentorship in the online space. And so that was I had to work through a lot of stuff from that experience to get to where I'm at now. But essentially, I ended up finding mentors and coaches and other teachers in the online space that I aligned with on a deeper level, I guess you could say. And, teachers like Gabby Bernstein and some of my current favorite teachers are like Heather Bruce Allison, and I love Ruthie Cease, and I love Andy Love. And so some of those, it was a gradual progression from like crazy, toxic, broken patriarchy to, oh, this is where I want to be. I want to be in this like creative space that's collaborative and where there's community and where like trust and honesty are values, as well as like mutual respect and that kind of stuff, rather than the whole cutthroat competition, like, toxic masculine. What would we say? Heather Allison calls it wounded masculine.
Yeah, and that's it, right? So you didn't, like, when you were leaving that industry, like the construction industry, did you know that that's what you were seeking, or were you just kind of, because I know the journey was gradual, but were your desires gradual, or were they unfolding as you went along?
I feel like they were totally unfolding as I went along, because when I first started in the online space, I was a health coach, and
Mm.
I had graduated from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and I was kind of doing like weight loss coaching. And at that time, it wasn't exactly what I thought it was, and it wasn't working out for me as well as I thought it would. And it took me a long time to figure it out, but I realized now it was because I wasn't aligned with that vision or that mission. Like weight loss is not something that I feel connected to and aligned with, especially now knowing about diet culture and knowing about diet culture being rooted in racism and like all that kind of stuff. And my first coach pretty much pushed me to do weight loss coaching because they were like, that's low hanging fruit. Everybody wants to lose weight. It's an easy way to make money. And I was like, ooh, that feels so gross.
Yeah.
So, you know, and at that time, I guess that was in 2017. So that was just like 4 years ago. And ever since then, it has been a very gradual process. And now I'm fully immersed in this desire to build businesses, my own and my clients and everybody, like whoever wants to be in this, you know, on this boat with me, from the feminine paradigm of just, and it's not necessarily, I don't even know sometimes if there's a better way to say feminine paradigm, but like the new paradigm, the collaborative aspect of things, and really just having the like community over competition type of perspective. And it's, yeah, I just feel so strongly that we need that now more than ever, especially with what's happening in the political climate and all the things that are going on in the world. We need more embodied leaders. We need more women who trust themselves and their intuition and who are taking care of themselves, because women run the world. Like, it's true, really, because also we carry, you know, the ability to create life. And yes, we need men to do that too, obviously, but like, in order for that to happen, it has to be a collaboration. So it's like, you know, the whole process of building a new world from a completely different paradigm is something that I'm super passionate about.
Yeah, and I love that so much, because it's one example that I've been that's just come up in different conversations lately, is like how, you know, like there's the chief, right? But then there's the spiritual leader of the tribe, and the spiritual leader is the feminine or the woman, and the chief always consults her. There's a collaboration in the decisions. So like if we bring that now into like our modern age, it's this really grounded, balanced way of approaching how we run business and how we operate in the world as well, especially at the higher level. Because like I've seen businesses like you, like I've seen businesses that are super male dominated and super like, and by male dominated, I mean from that imbalance of the toxic elements, or the unbalanced elements, the drive, which is important, but without the balance of the collaboration, you know, like it's always those things, and felt stifled in those environments. And then when I went into business as well, I felt this, like, you know, like I'm like, yeah, but I'm trained in how to do these things, so why isn't it working for me, and why am I stressed, and why, you know, is everything sort of feeling so tense and everything. And it's just this difference of stepping into actually what's aligned for me. And I think that's a really powerful point that you do make, is because there's a difference even for men, like even for the masculine, right? Like there's a difference between what's aligned for me and what am I doing just to win. And so your area is in, you were going to say something, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, and not only is it sometimes just a win, but also just because that's what we're programmed with. And when I say we, I just mean humanity in general, is that, you know, men are also programmed and conditioned to be a certain way and to do life a certain way and do things a certain way. And so are women. And that programming is the old broken paradigm. which is why we need a new system and a new structure and a completely new paradigm. So yeah.
Yeah. So tell us more about what that new paradigm looks like in how you do business, because you've got sacred sales and magnetic marketing, and sales and marketing are typically harsher industries. So
Right.
yeah, tell us more about that.
Yeah, totally. Well, so for me, like I define sacred sales as a process where we invest in ourselves and also are selling our services in a way that is aligned, in a way that is mutually satisfying, and that where you're either the buyer or the seller, and the person on the other end of that transaction is both people feel empowered in their decision to go into that relationship, whether it's a yes or a no. That my job as a coach is to help my clients get to an empowered yes or no, whether or not they want to work with me. And so sacred sales is like the opposite of like shame-based sales calls, or shame-based marketing, or I could probably go on and on, but I don't want to sit here and get lost for words. But selling from a sacred space really just means that when you're selling or when you're investing, again, I look at it from both perspectives, because I think that they're both very connected. And so anytime you're in that position of either investing or in selling, that it's really important to know that whatever happens, it's essentially like a huge trust factor. Like I trust people that I get on a sales call with to make the best decision for them. And I'm not here to convince them to work with me. I'm here to help them decide what is best for them and empower them to make a decision that is based on, their own capacity, essentially. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into sacred sales, and I actually just wrapped up my School for Sacred Sales program, which is a 12-week program. But that is the basis for it. And I have learned from many different entrepreneurs and from many different business coaches, and this method is the one that I like the most and I use for myself. And it's pretty much just a conglomeration of all the different things that I've learned from the people I really respect and appreciate and look up to in the online space. And, in terms of magnetic marketing, like magnetic marketing is essentially the marketing side of sales, where it's an invitation. There isn't any kind of like fake urgency, and there's not any shame-based or like making people feel that fear of missing out in order to get them to like sign up for your stuff or whatever. Because I think that's just it's a very incongruent way for me to market my services. I believe that in magnetic marketing, you're drawing your people to you simply by being yourself. And simply by trusting that the right people are out there and that they're going to show up and they're going to be there when they're ready and they need whatever it is that, you're offering. So I find that I'm super passionate about this also, because in teaching this, for me, it makes me feel so amazing, and it lights me up so much to help other women see that they don't have to invest in themselves or sell their services or products in the way that we see a lot of people doing it. In that kind of like toxic bro marketing, bro culture type of way. And because it doesn't work for the feminine cord person. It just doesn't. And when it comes to being able to teach that to other women, like my base value and base mission is to essentially spread women's financial liberation and empowerment. So changing the relationship between women and money and wealth and investing and financial stuff, that's what I'm really passionate about, because there's so much shame and guilt around women having money or selling their services. And I feel like it's time for a new story, a new timeline for that.
Mm. Oh, there's so many good things in that I'm like, where do I even start? But you're right. Like, it was only within some people's lifetimes, like a few decades ago, that women had to get permission from their husband to get their own, like, open their own bank account, right? Like, it's not that long ago. So there are these overhanging stories about money and what that means as a woman to have money, and how that plays out in our like relationships, especially like heteronormative relationships as well. Like, you know, what that means when a woman's earning money or earning, whether it's more or less money than her partner or her husband, or who, you know, like, it's all of these stories that play a role in how we perceive what we can do. And then it's about, like, you know, it's all the stories about when we do put ourselves out there as women and share our services and sell our services and want to be of service and offer them out to the world. It's also the stories of how that's perceived, because it's not done normally, or, you know, like, you know, there's an infinite number of stories around what that means, especially as a parent, or, you know, like, why aren't you more successful by now, or, like, you know, who are you to be so successful? Like, it's all of the everything. And it sounds like what you're doing and the work you're doing is really, you use this word, it's really about empowering people. And it means that, like, whether it's as the service provider or as the buyer, right, as the purchaser. And I think it's important that purchasers, like people who are buying services, are empowered, because then they actually get more out of it. They're invested in it, yes, financially, but there's a different level of investment that comes with that empowerment, because they get more out of it. They get to show up in a different way in themselves, and that kind of has that ripple effect out as well, right?
Yeah, totally, absolutely. Yeah, and one of the things I watched a show, it was on Amazon, I think it was called Mind Your Mind, and the guy was talking about essentially like propaganda and how like mainstream media and marketing and how all that stuff came to be, and why and how they use it now. And I found it so fascinating, because it's essentially you know, mainstream media and marketing are essentially creating solutions for problems that don't really exist, but it makes us think there's a problem. And this is just like wide spectrum, kind of like the wide, you know, lens view of it. But like, I don't want to be a part of that. That's like my point. I don't want to be a part of trying to solve a problem for someone who doesn't even have the problem. Like, you know, I mean, it just seems out of integrity for me to sell my services to somebody who really doesn't need it. So like, when I'm personally selling my services, if I don't think someone needs what I have to offer, then I'm not going to make them an invitation. I'm not going to make an offer to somebody who I don't think needs my stuff. And I feel like that is something that maybe was not widely known before. It was like, if you could get a sale kind of thing, you know. But like, no, I want to work with people who truly want to be here and be doing the work, and who want to be doing it with me. So, and I just find that really important. And yeah, that show, Mind Your Mind, I think it was just like a documentary, but it was very interesting. And I highly recommend it if anybody wants to kind of see the history behind marketing, like mainstream marketing and stuff like that. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's hard because like I come from kind of a marketing background, like, well, yes, but I fell into it because of what I studied, which wasn't explicitly marketing, it was PR. But you know, like they're lumped together so often, you kind of just go with it. But
Yeah.
I like marketing gets a bad rap, but you're right, like it, and so does public relations. And I am constantly reminding people or going through periods of education in how I show up with that in my business, which is more about I literally chose to study public relations at uni because my view of it was that it was about relating to the public and relating to each other. It wasn't about the spin doctoring. And in fact, like those subjects that might have, not that they were necessarily teaching that, but might have lent themselves more to that viewpoint, I didn't actually do that well in, you know, like, or as well in as the ones that were just about communicating and like finding ways to communicate with people so that they understood, or that, you know, there was this mutual understanding or whatever it is, right? Relating to others. And that's always been my mission, reflecting back like in my work as an employee to now as a business owner. And that feels more aligned in integrity with me. And I wanted to bring that in because you use certain words in your business, like pleasure-based intuitive business. And to me, that side of like the PR or the communication is pleasure-based in the sense of it's empowering and it means that we can connect more to each other. And that's exciting. Like that excites me up. That excites me. That lights me up. What does that mean? Like when you talk about, like when you use those words, pleasure-based intuitive business, what does that mean for people who hear it and just go, that just sounds like a lot of like kind of little bit raunchy words. Like, what is that?
Well, for me, it really comes down to, I mean, pleasure-based is like, if it doesn't bring you joy, if it doesn't bring you pleasure, why are you doing it? You know, and there, like, caveat, yes, we all have to do certain things that don't bring us joy, and there's like lots of things we have to do to adult and to human that aren't our favorite things to do. But like, if you can choose what you're doing in your business or even in your life in general, and if you can choose the things that bring you joy the most and that turn you on the most and that bring you the most pleasure and that bring you the most fulfillment and that bring you the most connection with yourself and with those around you, then that's where we need to be going, instead of the like settling for, you know, breadcrumbs. And part of this is like, it feels a little, what's the word I want to say? It feels kind of taboo to be a person, especially a woman, in this world that wants more and that still wants more after having more, right? Like, I want more. I want a better life. I want more financial security. I want more joy, more freedom, more pleasure, more play, more movement, more motion. I like want more of everything. And that feels edgy to say out loud, even because a lot of women traditionally, and especially just in like, if you think about it generationally, we're not supposed to want more. We're supposed to just take what we get and be grateful for it.
And not be too much,
right?
or ask for too much.
Yeah, and not be too much. Like the being the too muchness and then the not enoughness. Like that's such a huge, it's such a huge paradox, and it's damaging. It's problematic, you know. But and then in terms of the intuitive piece, is like women have extremely intuitive abilities. And when we give ourselves the opportunity and the permission to tap into that, it creates more pleasure in just the day to day. And, you know, for me, I think just in general, intuitive business kind of aligns with the like higher goals of the universe, or, you know, whatever you want to say, but like the airy fairy stuff that's out there where a lot of people maybe don't necessarily connect to that out there stuff. But like if you bring it down to earth and you land the plane literally and just be like, okay, so what that means for me is that I'm choosing from a place of instinctual feelings, and that I'm not ever choosing anything that doesn't align with what I desire. And that also kind of like, you know, I think it goes into buying stuff and how we consume, like which, you know, whatever conscious consumerism, right? If you think about the difference between somebody who goes to the store, goes to the department store and just buys a bunch of stuff that she sees that she likes, versus somebody who goes to the department store and then finds a number of pieces that she loves and like can identify the components of these things that she loves, and says, I'm just really intentional with how I purchase, with how I invest in myself, with the things that I buy. And to me, that is kind of along the lines of intuitive, intentional living. You know what I mean? So that feels like very verbose and kind of out there, but I'm sure somebody out there will connect with it.
Yeah. And that's the whole point though, right? Like it's I like the use of the word intentional also, because like I use that, like, how can we live on purpose? Like I've done workshops on those things. It's like, you know, creating a life on purpose, or like living on purpose, and being like, right, it just makes you go like, ah, like, yeah, okay, like I want to show up on purpose. And I think for me at least, it's a little less about burning old shit down, and it's a little more about building up what actually feels intentional for us, or like you said, like what feels pleasurable or enjoyable or lights us up. And the more that we just build that up, like then people have that empowerment and the freedom to choose what that is, whatever that does look like for them.
Totally.
Yeah,
absolutely, I agree. And I also agree that or I guess I would say I believe strongly that, you know, building and creating is absolutely a feminine trait, because we are creators. And I think all humans are creators in a certain sense, but like really building up that type of, or let's say that way of living, and that way of just looking at life in general. It's like, and to me, I also really love choosing to be very deliberate. You know, it's the same thing as being intentional, but like I choose to be very deliberate with how, like, even I'll just use the clothing for example, because I just got this new jumpsuit and it's so adorable and I love it. And I just I have to talk about this because it's important. It's important. So like when I used to go to the stores, I would buy just jeans that if it fit, I'd buy it. Now it's like, if the jeans don't fit, feel good, look good, make me excited to look at myself in the mirror, if you know, if there's any like tags or itchy spots on them, I don't buy them, because it's like, why? I literally think that, you know, and this is just a small example of how we can be so intentional and so deliberate with what we're choosing, with our choices, right? I just feel like that's something, you know, because in the big picture, it's like a wide scope, but there's little stuff that we can look at in the day to day, you know, like when you go to the store to buy yourself some groceries or some clothing or whatever.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, because like, and you're right, like everyone can tap into that feminine, because it's not about like gender or sex or anything, like feminine and masculine energies anyway, but it's it's the tapping into the deliberateness of what feels good and why am I choosing this? Whether you're buying it or choosing it or spending your time or energy on it, whatever, like, you know, or reaching out to someone to speak to them outside of, like, in a personal context, you know, like anything like that. It's like, why am I choosing to do this? And what effect does it have on me? And
I love it.
yeah, like it's really like, what do I want to be deliberate with in that essence, and how do I want to show up in my life and for me in that way? And I think, like, I feel like I can think of like 10 different men that would, like, you know, that benefit, like, that either would or do show up in that way that benefits so much, you know, like, so it's this whole different languaging, which is what it sounds like you're doing, is you're creating and rewording without taking away, just repurposing language to give a different perspective on what that could mean. So like we've covered like sacred sales, magnetic marketing, just to have the understanding of, like, and the feeling of, oh, this is what the purposeness of this is meant to be, or the deliberateness, the on purpose, the intention. There's language in that holds energy, that gives a certain feeling. And it sounds like what you're doing is relanguaging things to be more deliberate with all of this work to empower people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because one of the important pieces that I feel really needs to be addressed in a lot of different ways is like, words have energy. Words have energy and language has energy. And it's, I have found myself over the last few years getting really in tune with the energy of the way things feel to me. And so, like, I would just, if you don't mind, I would love to just give like one example of the energy of words, where sometimes it can be hard for us to like take care of ourselves, right? Especially as women, because we are of service, and we do tend to put ourselves last at times. And I feel like that is very normal and commonplace. And so one of the things that I was looking at was, I've moved recently, and so my self-care has kind of gone by the wayside a little bit. And I'm like, you know, full transparency, I'm honest about that. Like, I'm not perfect, but I was thinking to myself that I owe it to myself to whatever it was, right? Like, eat healthier, hydrate, brush my teeth, do my practices, you know, my self-care practices. And I thought, that actually doesn't really feel that good to me and my body. And then I was like, how could I say that where it feels really good and juicy? And then I was like, oh, it's an honor to take care of myself, eat healthy foods, nourish my body, you know, do my sacred practices, brush my teeth, whatever, right? Like, and so it reminded me that there is this way of the patriarchy where it's like obligatory. I owe it to myself, or like, you know, you owe it to other people to sell your services and be out there and like serving whatever, right? Or it's just really a complete honor to you know, do my work and to take care of my body and to show up as the highest version of myself that I possibly can. And I was just like, oh, I love it. I love that. And this is like stuff that obviously it's there, it's out there, and probably other people have thought this or know these things as well. But it's also like, oh, you know, kind of like a brain exploding moment. Like, oh yeah.
Yeah, like just like, oh, what? Like, just the epiphany of, oh, of course, like, we know this, but we don't, like, but we haven't like brought it back to our awareness again. And I think similar to your journey as well, like, from, like, because you know how you explained how your journey went from, you know, the construction industry and not exactly knowing what you were looking for, but taking each step along the way. I think language does that for us as well. Some people might need to hear you owe it because that's where they're at. And then it's like, and it's bringing them along the journey and going, look at the different ways, like you can reword these things so you feel a bit more empowered and step a little bit away from, like you said, the obligatory slave to what you should be doing, and into the, yes, it's an honor, and yes, I get to, rather than I have to, all of those different things. And I think if nothing else, like it just shows how powerful language is that we use with ourselves. And I think, like, I'm a word nerd. I'm that, like, I feel like it comes down to that, wherever you come from, it always comes down to like something about communication and language. So
Yeah.
I love how much like you've been able to share and shed light on that too. So such important work and perspectives to have in
for
these
sure.
areas.
So important. It's the good stuff. It's the juicy stuff. Also, it's how we grow and how we evolve. And that's like it's part of the process.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, thank you so much for imparting all of this amazing, beautiful wisdom. Where can people find you and follow you and your work?
Yeah, so I have a Facebook group. It's a free Facebook community called Feminine Business Magick, and Magick is spelled Magick with a K. And then also I can be found on my website, which is heatherhartman.com, and find me on Facebook. I'm super approachable. So I love having conversations, and I really love just, being able to connect with other like-minded people and continue to build and grow the community of collaborative human folk.
Yeah. I remember the first time we connected, it was on Instagram, and you sent me a voice message. Like, you actually, like, not only did you send a message and say hi instead of just doing like the follow as well, like you actually sent me a voice message, and I still remember that, and I still remember having the moment of, yeah, of course, why am I not doing this?
I
So
love it.
Heather
It's so
is
awesome.
super approachable, and that group is super fun also. I do really enjoy the conversations that I've gotten to have out of that group. Some of the guests on this very podcast have come directly from connections I've made in that group. So it's a really beautiful, inclusive, and supportive environment as well. And I'll include all the links in the caption and show notes as well. But yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.